Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming once again. And as always, I like to start out by just being grateful for everyone being here and how wonderful it is that you guys are willing to take out time in order to go within yourself. You know, throughout the day, there's plenty of distractions, plenty of things to do and try to get done. So many worldly responsibilities and other things, and you guys are all willing to take time out of your day to come here and try to just look within and discover whatever truths, whatever way in which we can take responsibility for our own lives, really, and try to become better people. And that's really amazing, and that's why I always really have a soft spot for anyone who does meditation or decides to spend long amounts of time going within themselves. It's wonderful. So today's talk is on tolerance. And so the way I usually like to set this up is the first 15 minutes, I'll kind of give a little bit of a discourse. Then we'll start doing a little bit of a guided meditation for 30 minutes or so. And then we'll leave the last 15 minutes or however much to any questions or to a specific topic that someone wants to bring up. And so I think we'll just wait one more moment. You guys are welcome to come and sit. Yeah. We have notifications. You're welcome.
Having a quiz question. Did it help to have that light going? I think that. And we set that up rather than do.
Yeah. The light is good. Just go towards the light, right? That's always a good general policy, I think. Okay. So, so the way I usually like to do these kind of group meditations is the first 15 minutes, which I'll give a little bit of a talk. Today's talk is on tolerance. And then for 30 minutes, we'll kind of do a guided meditation. And then for the last 15 minutes, we can do any questions, or if someone wants to bring up a specific topic, we can kind of discuss that. Okay. So, and as I'm talking, you guys are welcome. You can either keep your eyes open or closed, whatever makes you guys more comfortable. So tolerance. So tolerance is an interesting topic to me because, you know, how much one should tolerate when it comes to bad behavior, the outside world, certain things like that, has really to do with a lot of different factors. Usually the two primary factors is who you are and maybe how much of how would you say, how strong you are within yourself, and then maybe how triggering that outside thing is for you or whatever you perceive that as. So there's kind of always these two factors. And with tolerance, what we want to try to do obviously is become more and more tolerant, which really means the ability to be with things that maybe we are unagreeable or not as agreeable. Like here in this meditation center, we have a number of people who are also addicted to certain substances or struggling from a number of maybe mental disabilities. And the ability to be with those people and be okay around those people has a lot to do with how much tolerance and compassion you've developed. And usually, especially within Buddhism, we try to develop more and more tolerance of other people's views, other people's struggle, so we can kind of relate to them in the way that suffer in the way that we suffer. And a lot of times I think, whether it comes to even like social media, there was a really big campaign for a while where pretty much anyone who maybe didn't agree, whether it could be politically or otherwise, it was this whole idea of just getting rid of everyone you kind of don't agree with. And I always thought it was kind of an interesting thing, because on one side, it does make sense to protect yourself, and maybe you don't want to hear from certain people, maybe certain things you don't want to be influenced by, or maybe you find them draining. And there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself from those type of influences. But on the other side, I think for anyone, as we develop, we should be able to tolerate more and more and have greater conversations to open up those around us, because ultimately we're all human. And if we really want to have more love, more understanding, more compassion, we have to have a higher level of tolerance for those we don't agree with. One of my favorite kind of examples, I wish I could remember his name, maybe one of you know, but he was a famous kind of jazz musician, this black jazz musician who used to go around and talk to all the KKK members. And there was a whole thing about him because he would set it up as an interview, and then they would come in and then they would be, shocked that there was a black guy trying to interview him, even though he's the head of the neo-Nazis or the KKK or whatever it might be. And I always thought that was the greatest example of tolerance I've ever seen, of someone who's actually willing to sit with somebody they don't agree with, and willing to just see them as human beings and to let them voice however they feel, and to get connected to whatever that humanness is between us, because it's ultimately the fact that we're all humans that's really, the fact that we're all humans is means that all of us struggle, all of us suffer. The first noble truth in Buddhism is that there is suffering. And the more that you're aware of your own suffering and the suffering of others, the more I think you take things maybe people say, especially if they're not in positions of power. Almost everyone has a political belief or a belief about maybe how someone should be acting or whatever, but it's kind of like, unless you're actually in any position of power, ultimately it's all kind of arbitrary. It's really just about being able to connect with that person and love whoever they are. And ultimately, through that understanding, they'll start to change their own views, especially of you a lot of times. And so that's kind of what I wanted to touch on today. So kind of going back to then, how much should we tolerate of any given behavior, any given thing that we may or may not like? I think it ultimately, like everything else, pretty much comes down to self-awareness. And that's why meditation is so great, is because we can get a greater understanding of our own reactivity, our own views, and be able to see others clearly, so we can start connecting with our humanity and also act in accordance, because some people are dangerous. There are things that are maybe to be feared, not in a spiritual sense, but in the sense of, if some people mean you harm, you should act accordingly. And but a lot of times there can also be a lot of perceived harm. It's kind of like the old saying, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words may never hurt me. It's kind of like there's also truth in the fact of just understanding words are words and developing more tolerance, more compassion. Okay. And so with that said, if you could all just kind of close your eyes and we'll kind of just go inside a bit. I don't know if you guys are maybe new to meditation, but the primary thing is we usually start with, especially in Buddhism, is a breath meditation. So it's about just being aware of the breath. And what's going to happen when you're aware of the breath is the mind is going to wander. And it either goes to the past, the present, maybe something you're worried about. But what I want you to try to do is bring it back to the present moment. Because in this moment, there's nothing else you're trying to do other than be aware of your breath. And so you can begin by just taking really a couple deep breaths, closing the eyes. We also want to keep our back straight, head and neck straight. This is primarily because if you do start sitting longer and longer periods, as you should, with meditation, it should be a process of growth. If you sit in a bad posture, obviously you're going to have a lot of back pain. You sit for an hour or 2 hours without correct posture, and that's why in the beginning, even for sitting short amounts of time, we want to have correct posture. Okay, and so what else about that? I've always found that sitting cross-legged is most effective. Obviously, you can sit in a chair if there's back issues, but for the most part, I find that sitting cross-legged kind of channels your energy upwards, which is kind of what you're trying to do, or what kind of happens naturally. But you don't have to try to make anything happen. We're not trying to force our mind to not have any thoughts or force this or force that. It's a matter of kind of training the mind in the same way you would kind of train a muscle, where you continually just continue to work it. Maybe you start, if you realize that you're not focused on what you're trying to focus on, then we calmly and patiently and compassionately come back. Because one of the first things we usually realize in meditation is we have far less control over our minds than we think we do. A lot of times we think I'm doing this or thinking I'm feeling this type of way, but almost everything is some sort of reaction. And usually when you get out of reactive thinking and behaviors, you find that you're quite peaceful and happy. So we're going to just kind of work on that together, try to find that space of just observing, not reacting. And we're going to start with the breath. So whenever you're ready, just close your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to continue to talk off and on throughout this to just kind of help guide the experience, but my words are really just to help kind of bring up certain things to be looked at, but your state should really kind of remain the same, which is an observing state, a state of being non-reactive and just trying to be with whatever comes up within the moment. One of the first things that usually comes up is you're not used to meditating, is some sort of feeling of boredom. A lot of times if you're used to always being on your phone or used to seeing videos or something, your mind's usually used to being very stimulated all the time. And so just kind of know that if there is some sort of anxiety or some sort of boredom or something like that, it's really your brain just recalibrating. And so with that knowledge, let's just take a couple minutes and sit with the silence. As we just observe, we're just kind of checking in with ourselves. Whatever's happened in the past is in the past. Whatever's in the future hasn't happened yet. So as we sit right here, going within ourselves and seeing what there is, we're really getting in touch with truth, direct experience of truth, of what we are going through, of our minds, just observing reality as it is. I'm a big believer in contemplation as a form of spiritual practice. And contemplation really is the ability to see things from different perspectives. Perhaps we can contemplate our family, we can contemplate our friendships, we can contemplate the world and our place in it. There's all these different places to stand from. And by standing these different places, we get a greater understanding of the whole. So today we're going to stand from the place of looking at how tolerant we are. How much can we tolerate from other people? What are some places that we have difficulty tolerating differences of beliefs or things that we find triggering? It's not about judging ourselves or condemning ourselves. It's about self-awareness. Everybody struggles with people who maybe have views that strongly oppose their own. We do have certain behaviors or have done certain things that we disapprove of. And here we're not really trying to think about behaviors or how I should act in this situation or how should I act in that situation. That's not really what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is really just to look. This is a looking and observing, non-reactive stance. One of the biggest factors of being tolerant also has to do with our own perceived level of safety. A lot of times we can feel very unsafe because of external things. And just kind of getting in touch with our own intrinsic safety, that this kind of goes back to a lot of the Buddhist ideas that we have a body, but that ultimately we've had many bodies, and that we don't have to be attached to a body, but can just see it as a body and kind of establish ourselves in this higher awareness, this beingness that feels so much deeper once you get in touch with it than even the world itself, this external world. If you can truly establish your awareness within yourself, then you never have to be afraid of anything external. Because with it comes a sense of knowing that you're not the body. Just observe your own sense of safety, how safe you feel. And see if you can notice any difference when your awareness is directed inside. You're in a state of just observing and not reacting, what that does to your sense of safety. If you observe fear, some type of anxiety within yourself, you don't have to push it away. Actually, in fact, that'll just suppress it, but what you can do instead is be with it. What you'll find is as you be with that emotion or that state, and you switch to a observing stance, a stance of just seeing it versus identifying with it. That too will be another way to kind of explain this process of feeling safer by going within ourselves. Just identifying with not only the body, but with the emotions as well. There's both the emotions and the mind that has what we say its own karma. It has its own patterns from the past. We've been conditioned. Some of this conditioning might serve us. Their conditioning might lead us to be less compassionate, feel fearful, reactive. And instead of trying to create something else to try to counteract that, the better solution is really to dissolve the fear itself, to dissolve the anxiety by being able to see it for what it is. We're being kind of proactive in a way, think of it like that. Instead of waiting to be in a situation where maybe you can no longer be tolerant anymore, or maybe we're actually afraid. We're just trying to sit with that kind of space, sit with our level of safety and our understanding of safety. The thing that's amazing about human beings is that we're self-aware. We can basically, through self-awareness, control and change our own destinies. We can reflect. Well, an animal pretty much lives off of instinct. You really can't change what it is. But human beings, by becoming aware, can and do. This is what the great saints and the great teachers from the past have taught us. That we don't have to be subjects purely to outside influences. Not used to sitting on the floor and start to experience some discomfort in the legs or back or wherever it might be. It is okay to move, just try to move mindfully, slowly. As long as it's not reactive and you're doing it consciously, it's okay, especially if you're not used to sitting without moving. Over time, though, you start to get used to whatever you experience, whatever discomfort, start to become a part of your meditation. And you can just kind of observe it and be with it. And be quite strange, because what you'll notice is that the pain itself will start going away, actually. Especially after long hours. Sometimes things that you thought would just hurt the entire period of meditation can sometimes just disappear through observation, non-reactive, observing, becoming more conscious. Tolerance of physical pain is also a form of tolerance, and even with sitting with discomfort, we build this ability to be with things that are uncomfortable, which is extremely useful. Because the more that we can be with things the way they are, instead of trying to change outside circumstances, the more at peace we can become. The reality is we have very little control over the outside circumstances, situation. And our mind is so used to going outside to fix all the problems. There's stress, worry, everything is always linked to something external, but very rarely do we go inside and say, how is it linked internally? And that's where all the real power is. Even if you were the most powerful king in the world, you couldn't control everybody. And still, there's no promise that someone wouldn't do something that would upset you or you wouldn't like. From a spiritual point of view, this world is here to help live out our karma, to help us progress spiritually. It's supposed to have a spectrum, everything from the highest level of saints to some of the most evil and corrupt individuals. I believe the world serves a purpose. And I think once we become in line with that spiritual purpose, it gives our own lives new meaning. We start to see each other as brothers and sisters, fellow human beings, fellow people who are suffering, afflicted with so many different defilements of the mind, so much anger, so much greed, so much delusion. And if we see these things in ourselves and we learn to observe them and forgive ourselves and start to try to change in a way that allows us to be more at peace with life itself, we really start to find some real solace, some real answers, some real truth. The mind has been habituated to be unhappy, to suffer, by craving things that it doesn't feel like it has, and to try to push away the things that it does have. Craving and aversion, craving and aversion. This is the basic principle about why we suffer as human beings. Just remember whenever you start feeling like you're getting wrapped back into a story, into your mind, into some sort of pattern, just go back to the breath. The breath will never leave you. As long as you are alive, you'll be breathing. And so that's why we use the breath as a type of rope for the mind, or to tame the mind. Also know that when you are meditating, everything is part of the meditation. The sounds, whatever discomfort, the weather, whether you're sweating or whether your skin's very dry. In meditation, we observe what is without reacting. Retraining this reactive part of the mind. This is why often after one becomes very proficient at meditation, then you go in the forest. But it can be difficult to meditate in the forest because there can be many distractions. Bugs, insects, birds, animals, the trees themselves, the ground. And then even as we progress beyond that, we can ultimately bring this way of being to our lives. And we don't even have to sit cross-legged or eyes closed, but can always kind of remain in a semi-observant, attached state. In which we can see ourselves and others as we are, without being clouded by greed, anger, hatred, and delusion. All these things cloud our judgment. So about 5 more minutes left in the meditation. So really, the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to stay silent. Just try to observe the breath. Allow yourself to relax. Deep breaths. Just sit. So with that, you can take one last deep breath and let it out. Um, and slowly you can just kind of relax your posture and open your eyes. Hope that was all right for everybody. Have you done any meditation before? Yeah, you ever? Yeah, okay. And you're all kind of like one family here? Wonderful. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was raised in like a Hindu ashram. Both my parents spent 10 years there. So I kind of also kind of come from a whole spiritual family where I've been basically doing meditation since I was born. Yeah. Okay. What do you guys think? Is it too painful? Is it all right? A little relaxing? Okay, right on. Yeah, so this time we usually just do any sort of question or topic. If anyone, it can either be something I said. I'm also open just to discuss just about anything. Um, and so either that or we can also just sit in silence. It kind of depends on how adventurous people are feeling. Yeah, go for it.
But
Yeah.
what if asking for a friend?
Okay, you're asking for a friend. Okay.
No, I think this is applicable to anyone who really explores the inner work that over this now.
Hmm.
Disintegration with friends and family. How does one?
Yeah. Actually, I was just talking to someone recently. I think one of their cousins like overdosed or something like, or even I guess there's been a lot of fighting, right, too, with ever being at home, right, and a lot of conflict, this type of thing. It's kind of what you're thinking about, and how to deal with that maybe in a spiritual way.
Slip in wavelengths with people closest to you.
Yeah.
Take a lot of courage from you to really confront this, but choices that close ones that don't additive over the long run. Different wavelengths.
Yeah. I think I get what you're saying. I mean, even actually, it's funny, I guess, to make it personal for myself, even, I mean, me and my sister kind of got into it. My friends kind of know, and it can,
Your sister wasn't with Joshua.
no, she was, but then we kind of like had a bit of a disconnect because she got a boyfriend who I wasn't very happy about. And I don't think, it was hard because I kind of changed, right? So I was the oldest child. So I was always kind of also the disciplinarian among my brothers and my sister. And it's even hard so many years later when you don't have that same dynamic of I'm the one disciplining or I'm the one that's telling you what to do. And now it's like, oh, we're just all grown ups now. But still, a lot of that stuff lingers over, and it's very hard to change dynamics in family, obviously. And so I think, like the number one thing that comes to mind is just to understand, to accept people as they are, because people really get to make their own choices. Every single person, no matter how toxic or how horrible you think whatever choice might be for them, everyone has the right to make their own choices, and it doesn't mean you have to love them less or care less. I think a lot of the problem is people attribute too much um, love with attachment, right? So if I don't try to make you do what I think is better for you, then maybe I don't love you. But they're really, it's like if there is a communication breakdown, like I've told you, hey, you know what, I think I really want to help you. I think this would be better if you did this decision or that decision. At the end of the day, everyone, you have to know going in that they get to make their own decision and that they're on their own spiritual path, you know? Um,
Mindfulness comes with awareness and comes forgiveness, gratitude, all those things.
yeah. Well, even there's really nothing even like in that sense, right? If it's really family members doing their own thing, right, where you just don't agree with what they're doing, or maybe they're fighting, or they don't see you. I guess that could be the other side of it. Maybe they're projecting all of their own stuff onto you, right? They don't see you for who you are. And, that's the harder one, really, because a lot of times, you know, people trying to show love to you can be them trying to manipulate and control you, and that's how they think they're showing love. And, that I guess goes almost back to the tolerance thing, because a lot of times it is something to be endured. Like even the Buddha used to talk about like backbiting and gossip and all these stuff. And as far as Buddhism is concerned, they were considered things to be endured. That there's a category of things which should be endured, and that was that group. So the more that you could endure people talking behind your back or not seeing you a certain way, that you could build this sort of quality that ultimately allows you to stand on your own 2 feet and believe in what you believe. You know, and you want to be as strong as you can in that. And knowing who you are. Because the fact is, most people are not very spiritual. We don't live in a very spiritual world, and most people don't have any interest in it, and they're more interested in, pleasure and money, and they're more of a hedonistic thing, and that's totally cool for them, and they get to make their own decisions, and then obviously they're not going to be as aware a lot of times, so maybe they're going to project like, oh, you should be doing this like me, make some more money, spend more time doing this and that. Maybe they want to critique you, because they don't understand ultimately what you're going after. And, it's, I've been blessed with having the family I do. I think that's really helped me. And I've, like with most things, I'm always surprised that most people haven't lost their minds because there's just so many things that can go wrong and so much stuff. And so, but the number one thing I think is really like the tolerance of that slander or whatever they're saying. And then also just really accepting people like, okay, maybe if it's, let's say a parent or something, just accepting, okay, I don't agree with my parent. She's telling me this. She has every right. She's my mom or something. So of course she's going to tell me maybe how she feels about stuff. And, you just try to hold it in the best light and also have compassion for your own reaction. Because a lot of times, especially with family, everything's really triggering because there's so much history, right? And so it's just like, if I'm going to be triggered and it's going to be triggering, and then you get triggered, you say, okay, now I'm going through being triggered. And then if you're just aware of that space and allow yourself to not be perfect, allow yourself your own humanity and your own, wherever you're at, right? Because even with a spiritual person, right, people might come up to you and say, well, you should like even especially, I think it's easy to turn everything almost around into guilt and say, well, I should feel peaceful. I know better. I know about awareness. I know that I should be meditating, right? Or I know that shouldn't take things personally, and yet maybe you feel like it's a personal thing. And so you can be okay with both of those. And you can be okay. You can have the knowledge of something and also know, okay, I haven't reached this level at it. I can know that enlightenment exists and not be enlightened. I can try to practice, and that's why it's just gradual. And I think like most of the path for me is like way more about tolerance and compassion and just like being honest, especially even with other people and even with my own flaws. I don't try to be perfect and act like I'm perfect and I know everything. Um, it's just, I've been so called to the spiritual path that I just feel like, I want to try to make that as much of a part of my life as I can. And this all becomes a part of that, and that's what it's about for me. Um, but yeah, does that kind of answer
Yeah, pretty much.
it?
We were talking about tolerance.
Yeah.
Uh, Friends and family, that's where tolerance should be really formidable the most. Find every avenue in really strengthening those first bonds, intimate bonds, and lifelong bonds that really keep you together throughout your life.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, right, is the whole change, like in Nietzsche, right, that everything changes. That's another really big concept, right? Because even, I mean, I think even with family and everything else, it can, relationships can always change. I think a lot of times people, even like say, actually, this is most obvious usually in marriage, where people are like a certain way when they get married, right? And they have a certain dynamic. And then over time, if you expect the same dynamic to be there when you were, say, like 20 and got married versus 80, things change and relationships change, people change, even the relationships with my siblings, right? I'm no longer like a superior like I was when I was, 18 and they were like still young teenagers or something. And I was playing that kind of, older brother role. And yeah, but and then, like I said, actually, I would say even beyond tolerance with other people, it's tolerance with yourself and your own stuff, right? The tolerance that, okay, maybe I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be angry. I'm not going to be okay. And being okay, not being okay. Like, I think tolerance is a lot of that. Actually, that's probably where it starts. And if you can tolerate your own stuff and, okay, I'm human and this is that. And then you start, I'm a human and I know I mess up. Well, this person's also a human. They also mess up. And, you know, as we become more aware of ourselves, I think we stop judging others, in a lot of ways. Yeah. Yeah. Any other topic or, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's not so much between observing and complying, but really observing and maybe hurting yourself. Like, are you thinking like maybe you sit too long and all of a sudden you're going to have knee problems type of thing? Or is it more something else like what's the compliance part? What are you complying? Hmm. Well, would the well, I think whether you should or shouldn't do something depends on really how you know what we want to do is be clear about the situation in any situation, whether even it's meditation or whether it's with another person, right? We want to see it as accurately as possible. If we can see our own and where we're at accurately, and we can see the other person and what they're doing accurately, then we can make an accurate choice about what we should do or shouldn't do. And so most of the observing part is really just to stop this identification that happens with our emotions and our mind, where a lot of times we can't see ourselves, right? And so we just think, oh, this person and it's that, and then it's at the end of the day, maybe when you calm down, right? Maybe you get like really worked up and you're really frustrated or angry, and then you make all these decisions, and you can't tell that you're frustrated or angry, right? But if we start building this quality of observing, then we can say, oh, okay, I'm kind of like, I mean, even at home, I remember I got in this thing and I was feeling really frustrated, and we were talking and having this conversation. So I said, okay, well, I hear you and that's wonderful. I'm just going to take a couple minutes. I'm going to like get back to you tomorrow about this, right? Because I knew that what they had said was really making me feel really sad and depressed, and I had all these emotions coming up, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to listen to you. I'm going to allow you to say whatever you have to say because I know you have to get it off of your chest. I'm going to sit with that, and then when I come back tomorrow, once I feel like whatever is within me is settled, and now I can see things as they are and make a decision about this, right? And so I think the and a lot of times too, I mean, you can be in a situation like with work where you just have to act, and maybe you do the best you can, right? Maybe you're upset and you have to do a certain job, and this has to get done by a certain time. There's a lot of pressure, and it's just that, and so you're just doing the best you can. But the more this quality of observing is there, the more you can kind of get a third person point of view, and that allows you to kind of maintain that spiritual frame. Hmm. Or just really like being able to see the ego for what it is. So you can just make kind of like whisper to yourself, okay, well, I need to like, I know I'm upset, so therefore I can do this other thing, or I can take some time, or I can, you know, just you have all of the information you need, I guess. And then the tolerance is really the ability to do that, right? So when you're under a lot of pressure, the ability to not just lash out, because a lot of times the reason we lash out or do something is because it feels great. Like if someone says something, you're like, screw you too. And they're like, it's like this elated state where there is no wrong. And now you get to, be the vengeful God who's like going to rain hell on them, and, just to give one example, of course. Um, but, uh, but that observer, when you start saying, okay, well, I'm going to endure this and tolerate, I think it builds up, because you're never really happy. Like a lot of the times, especially if you do something out of anger, if anything that's usually triggering is also really close to you. It's only really the people that you get really mad at a lot of times is because you feel really connected to them. And so, the more tolerance we can develop in everything, the more that we can make better choices. Yeah. Thank you. So I usually try to kind of end on time. So that's been an hour. So no other questions that are burning inside. I guess we'll just kind of conclude. And I always like to conclude once again the same way I kind of start, with just kind of recognizing how amazing it is that you're all here, and that how much of our life is spent trying to fix and change things outside of ourselves, and just to spend even 1 hour kind of going within and saying, hey, let me work on my own issues, my own mind, try to get some awareness about stuff is just amazing. And that's what it's all about. And doing that as a group with other people just builds this kind of momentum. And I feel like, it feeds me, and hopefully it feeds all you as well. And thank you. So may you all be happy, peaceful, and liberated. Thank you.